Welcome. I'm April, and I am the founder of the Love and Loss Project, which is a comfort and inspiration station for women and parents who have experienced the loss of a baby, child, or pregnancy. And so I've been doing these periscopes really basically every Friday for the last little while because I wanted to offer a bit of space and a bit of a platform that people could have an avenue where we discuss topics like grief and loss, because I think that this is one of the areas in our society and culture that gets really overlooked and really ignored. And so as we all will eventually go through some kind of experience of grief and loss, I think that this is something that we need to have more conversation about. Hi, Tinky, how are you? So what I'm talking about today, although if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear them and we can discuss that absolutely, because one of my goals is to always make sure that this time actually feels useful, because I know that we're all busy people and I really want to make sure that we're covering the stuff that people are interested in. So I had a question come in that asked, how do you move on from the pain of losing a little one? And so I want to thank you first, the person who had sent that question in to me, and to remind people that if you have a specific question or topic that you would like me to discuss and that you'd like to have a little bit more conversation about, then send me your questions and comments and concerns, and yours might be featured the next time that I do this, next Friday. So you can reach me at april@lovelostproject.com or via Instagram at lovelostproject or Twitter. So the question today is, how do you move on from the pain? How do you take a step? And I think that this is such a big and important question, so I wanted to spend some time with that. And the first thing I would suggest is that when we're venturing into this territory, that you get really clear on what are your reasons for wanting to move on from the pain. And I just want to caveat that to say that my own perspective is that I don't think that we ever fully move on from the grief or from the loss, but we do learn to carry that with us. And that is some words, I'm not sure who had kind of come up with that statement. It might have been Francesca Cox, I'm not sure. But that idea really resonates with me because I think it's a more accurate idea to say that we don't move on, we learn to carry it with us. But in terms of pain specifically, the pain of loss and how we move away from the pain of loss, I think that is a little bit different, because I think that that part is a necessary act of survival. And so my first strategy for that would be to ask you, what are your reasons for returning to life? What are your reasons for returning to yourself? What are your reasons for returning away from the pain? And that can feel really obvious in a way, right? Where we want to say, well, it feels terrible or it feels awful, so of course I don't want to feel that way. But take a second, and for those of you watching it, maybe take a second now to truly just check in with yourself at a bit of a deeper level. Because that's what we want to access, because that essentially is going to be your lifeline to help you pull yourself out of this dark pit of grief. So what are your reasons for wanting to move away from the pain? Are there people who need you here? Do you have commitments that you need to take care of here? What is important to you in your world, either present tense or that you're wanting to create for yourself, that needs you to show up and be present and be functional to do that? Is there projects that you are passionate about? Is there other little ones that you are parenting who need you? Do you have a relationship, or do you want to have a relationship with somebody that needs you? So I think that it is really important that we kind of do that extra piece to get clear on what our actual motivation is. And I don't think that there's a right or wrong. Thanks so much for the hearts. I also just want to say that if anybody knows anyone who might benefit from these conversations, then please feel free to send and share this link with people. So what are your reasons for wanting to move away from the pain? For me, asking myself this question, or getting clear, at least on what my motivation was an absolute necessary and critical part of my recovery after losing my daughter. And the answers that I came up with myself, one of the things that I knew for sure is that I did not want to create a legacy for my daughter where ultimately she would be the reason, or be referred to as the reason, of why her mother was now a broken, non-functioning mess in life. We have so much taken from us when we experience loss and the loss of a baby. There are so many moments, the list is inexhaustible, about all of the missed opportunities to parent our little one. But for me, this idea allowed me to do something for her, allowed me to do something for my daughter, and I personally needed to do that because we lose so much. And this was a way for me to keep her as part of my life, to create some meaning or some purpose about how our lives intertwine together. And so I wanted to make sure that I did not stay stuck in that dark pit of despair because I did not want her to be the reason for that. And that's ultimately, how that would work, right? That when our friends and family talk about that idea that, April was great, life was just fine, until Nora died. I did not want that to be the legacy that I created for my little one. And so I really made the commitment that even though I did not fully know how I was going to exactly survive and get out of this, I needed to make the decision that I would. And that meant turning at times away from staring into the depths of the pain and seeking out and making it my mission to find things that would help bring me up even just slightly. So I think there's kind of that idea. So this is the next piece of that. So one is making the decision to survive and finding your motivation and your reason for doing that. Thank you so much for the hearts. The next piece is how do we put that into action? And I think that keeping in mind the idea that grief is exhausting on all levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausting, that we have to take that down to a moment by moment choice. And I definitely get that some moments are harder to make this choice than others, but ultimately this is what we want to keep bringing ourselves back to, is the question of will blank either build me up a notch or is it going to take me down? Because any action that we take in our day, whether that's answering the phone, getting out for a walk, or what we choose to have for lunch, any action that we're doing is not neutral. Everything either moves us up a notch or takes us down. So I became really intentional and really conscious about really my actions. So if I was choosing to stay in bed, I was doing that because I was exhausted and I needed to. I needed to recharge. I needed to rest. And so ultimately that was going to take me up a notch or two in terms of my strength, my energy, my resilience, my capability of getting through this. Consequently, if something ran the risk of taking me down a notch, so let's say I had an invitation to come to a dinner, right, with friends and family. If I was going to possibly be around pregnant people and I maybe felt a little too raw at that time, I would give myself permission to say no, because I would say, is this going to help make me feel better, or is this going to take me down a notch? And I would give myself that screening tool to get through. And so feel free as we have this chat to share with me any other tips or strategies that you have used to help you move around the pain. And so what has helped you to do that in your life? One of the ideas that people often talk about, which for me has been really important, was even just a simple act of yoga. So there were times where I couldn't really get out of my house, but I could even just roll out the yoga mat and follow along with some YouTube video. And for me, I think that there really is that idea that if we wait until we feel like doing it, then we're not going to do anything, right? Because when we're dealing with grief and loss, of course we don't feel like going to the yoga studio. Of course we don't feel like getting out for a walk, right? Really, we feel like absolute crap, and possibly the only thing we feel like doing is dying right now and giving up. And so these are those things that we have to build into our day and our life on purpose and intentionally. So what brings me up a notch? What takes the edge off this pain even slightly? The other thing that I would encourage you to maybe spend a bit of time thinking about is, besides the obvious, what purposes is your pain serving for you right now? And so yes, I absolutely know firsthand that the pain is huge and suffocating and real and valid. But when we look at the idea of making decisions to start to move away from the pain, it can be helpful to stop and really get clear on not just our motivation for moving away from it, but what might be our kind of unconscious motivation for staying with it. And one of the ideas that I also kind of had to struggle through, and that other women have talked to me about, that seems to come up as a big theme, is the idea that if I move away from my pain, maybe in some ways I'm also moving away from my child that I lost. There's often ideas as well as, if I'm moving away from the pain, what will other people think if they see me smiling, laughing, returning to life? Will they think I don't care? Will they think that I don't need support anymore? Will they think that this is a non-issue for me? And so I ask you to just spend a little bit of a minute thinking about what else might be nudging you to hang on to the pain and to grip onto that a little tighter than you actually want to. And the other thing I would add is we have to also let ourselves feel it. So while these things are going to be really good and really necessary to help create our resilience to get through this stuff, we also don't want to confuse that with the goal of bypassing the pain. Because that is healing, right? For me, I gave myself, thank you so much, welcome. I made a decision to give myself time off of work so that I would not have to compartmentalize the pain in any way, which for me as a therapist was particularly important, because my whole job is to really hold space and help people gain clarity on their needs and their healing. And I obviously couldn't do that when I was full of my own. But that's what I would kind of encourage you to think about is it possible to make some room and space for your pain? I did not want to have to just compartmentalize it and not think about it. I wanted to be able to be present for when the pain did come, because I absolutely believe in that quote that that which we resist gets stronger. And so are you able to really process or to sit with the waves of grief when they hit? Because I would also argue that that time is precious and it is an inevitable part of the process. And if we do not allow ourselves to feel what we are feeling now, it's going to come back later, possibly at an even worse, more inconvenient time. And so, do you let yourself do that? Do you let yourself go and sit in the bath and just connect with what you're feeling and what your experience is? Because I think that it's also important to honor the pain. Of course we want to move away from it, right? Of course we want to move away from what hurts. That's common human instinct. That's how we're built to survive, is to crave moving away from pain, and to be a bit hardwired to seek that out. But can you also be present in letting yourself feel that? Oftentimes when I talk to people, there is a fear that comes up that if I stop and I sit with the grief and I let myself feel it, what if I get washed out completely by the waves of that emotion? What if I kind of lose my grips on the edge and I can't stay here? And I would remind you of the fact that you have already survived the absolute worst, hardest moments of this, right? Which is the moments when we lost our little one. You have actually already survived that moment. All these other ones, yes, they are hard. Yes, they are real. Yes, they are overwhelming. But you've already done harder. And you can absolutely do the next bits that need done too. So that's really it for me, unless anybody else has any other topic or question or comment that they want to spend a moment discussing. I thank you all so much for coming in. Like I said, feel free to send me a question if there's something that you would like to discuss or to have me discuss with you. I have to remind myself that it's okay not to be okay. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I think that's such a brilliant and important point, that we often judge ourselves for the pain, right? We really do. We say, oh my goodness, maybe I should be stronger. Maybe this is embarrassing. And we all know how much it sucks to feel vulnerable, right? Which is really what that is. And I don't know about you, but I often kind of say, in some strange way, my experience of grief has been really humbling, because we are just dumped into this pit of vulnerability and stuff that we can't control and stuff that is just bigger than us. And so absolutely we need to tell ourselves that it is okay not to be okay. And I would add on that, how possibly could you be okay when we really lose the things that matter most to us? How could we possibly be okay? And so one thing I'd like to talk a little bit more about at some point is even just how we automatically answer that question of, how are you? I'm fine, right? There is such built-in pressure of just the standard script of our society to really hide our vulnerability and keep it to ourselves. And I actually had a great discussion last week with Shauna Percy. For those of you who don't know, who's the author of Breathe, and she is also known as the Good Grief Guru. And she had some really neat points in her book that we talked about a little bit, which is just that pressure to always say that we're fine, and that in some ways we really cut ourselves off from an opportunity to, one, receive support, and two, be real and authentic with ourselves. How could you be fine right now? Right? So thank you everyone for coming in. If you found this video helpful, then please share it with your friends who might benefit, and other parents who have experienced loss, because I do believe that this is such a taboo topic in our culture, and a kind of off to the margins topic in our culture, and the risk is of that is that people end up being really alone and really isolated. Thank you so much for coming by. So I will see you all again next time. And again, feel free to send me any questions, april@lovelostproject.com. Would you ever consider touching on trying again? Ever consider touching on trying again sometimes? Okay, how do I deal with unsupportive family members? Yeah, so definitely those would both be really good conversations for us to talk a little bit more about. I think that those are really important questions. Yeah, and obviously other people can relate to that too. The idea of trying again, I think, is a huge topic that we really need to, and that's a great point, to spend really a more formal time doing that. So I can definitely talk about that a little bit more next week as well. But for right now, I might just say that grief kind of bursts our bubble of this illusion of invincibility. And on one hand, that is so humbling and terrifying. And at the same time, it's also, I think, just really real. And so that's that loss of innocence that happens when we lose a little one. We lose that kind of naive expectation that everything is always going to be okay, because what those of us who have lost little ones experience hard and firsthand and in some really horrific ways is that sometimes that's really not the case, right? And so what you're talking about is really the idea of, if you're choosing to try to get pregnant again and try to have another baby, What you're really asking is, how do I be brave? And I think that that is powerful. So Brene Brown wrote a book called The Gifts of Imperfection and Daring Greatly. And I would recommend those books. They don't talk about grief and loss specifically, but they are really strong books that talk about the idea of living wholeheartedly in ways that are vulnerable, because that ultimately is the human condition. Before we experience loss, even though I knew that awful things could happen, obviously I spent my career talking about awful things that happen, it still is this kind of shocking, surprising thing when we really get knocked down at the knees, right? And so what we're really doing, which is also part of that idea of moving away from the pain, is learning to live more wholeheartedly and brave. So that's what I would encourage you to think about when you're talking about the idea of trying again for another baby. How do you be courageous with that? How do you tap into that part that wants what you want despite what has happened to you in the past? How do you honor that piece of yourself that says, I desperately want to be a mom again? And that you hang on to that and you support yourself kindly in that process of moving forward with that truth. And I would say that truth needs you. It's there for a reason, and you owe it to yourself to listen to that. So you train your courage muscles and you move forward with that. And let me know your thoughts on that, or if that feels useful at all. Just to touch on a little bit the idea of dealing with difficult family members. I love that topic. And it's funny because I was actually just working on a module of that for my my baby loss survival guide that I'm creating, because that's something that I talk with people about all the time, is how do you deal with the difficult friends and family. And so what that makes me think of is there's a lot of insensitivity, right, that comes about when we are dealing with the loss in general, but I think especially the loss of a miscarriage baby, infant, because we really lack a social protocol for this, right? We have in some ways certain protocols and expectations of what we do when people lose their spouses. We kind of know a little bit about what that script sounds like. But when it comes to baby loss, I would argue that our generation is kind of blazing some new trails, because in the past, it was considered that the kindest thing you could do when somebody lost a baby was the quietest thing. People said nothing. They did nothing. They thought that the best way to heal from grief of a miscarriage or losing a little one is that we just move on and don't talk about it and don't think about it and get back to your life. And what we kind of know now is one that is awful and sad and tragic in and of itself. And it makes me really sad for the generations of women that had to deal with even more silence than we do. But it also helps me understand how sometimes we don't get the support. Yeah, yes. That's what happened to me, and it hurts deeply. So what I would encourage people to think about is that when you don't get that support from your aunties, mother-in-law, family members, the people in your life, that we really have to remind ourselves that this is not personal, and that we do not need other people to validate the fact that what we feel matters. And that's our bottom line truth. And our loss matters. And so I know from my own experience, it can often feel like you were trailblazing some of that ground of really just letting people know that this is huge. This is enormous, and it requires care and comfort. And so I think that's the other piece of that, is that grief also forces us to grow. And one of the ways that it forces us to grow is by letting other people know what we need and how to support us better, and to not take it personally when they are not able to do that. So we should definitely talk about that a little bit more next time. So I'm going to wrap up for today and say thank you so much. I will put this video, actually, I should put this video up on my Facebook page, so you can check it out and send it to other people if you like. And again, thank you so much, and take care of yourselves. And maybe for today, you ask yourself, what is one thing? Because of the unsupported, I no longer walk on eggshells. Yes. And that's kind of the power of that. In my workbook, I actually included this quote that says, my give a damn is broken, which is the title of a song I'd heard once. And I think that that's one of the things that we grow with as well, is in the past, and it's still always a work in progress for me as well, I cared way too much what other people thought, and I waited way too much. Spent way too much time waiting for other people to validate the fact that I wanted what I wanted, I felt what I felt, I needed what I needed. And this is kind of one of the transformative experiences of loss, that if you lean into it, you grow. So yeah, I think that's so impressive that you no longer walk on eggshells, and because you can't. And you don't know what other people's stuff you're stepping on, right? And so I think that there's a lot that we could read into with the silence or the insensitivity or the rudeness with other people that truly doesn't have anything to do with us. And so if I touch on something that, hurts somebody or triggers something for them about loss or grief or whatever that is, I can't protect them from that and live through my own experience. So it's kind of that air mask philosophy, right? That we really have to take care of our own selves first. That's a necessary part of the process. So thank you, everyone. I'll see you next time. Bye.